You know, it's a darn shame that the only official scent-related merch we've gotten, to my knowledge, is for the Twist dorms and not for the boys. I mean, there are other games that have these sorts of perfumes, so why not Twist? Well, today I'm taking matters into my own hands and giving each of our favorite boys a signature fragrance. Now, since I'm not really a perfume connoisseur, nor am I sponsored by any real brands, I'm going to be providing the three main notes I think match our contenders, rather than give them a patented blend. This will leave a little room for your imagination to fill in any gaps, and as always, if your opinion differs from mine, let me know down below. Additionally, to explain my choices, I'll be talking about EN server story content, so consider this your spoiler warning. Now then, let us begin with our very best buddy, Grim. Grim, to me, just screams stinky cat who refuses to take a bath, and I honestly don't think Grim would use any scented products. Some pet shampoos do have a nice smell, but they're not really specific to Grim, and I have no idea what shampoo Vil and the rest of Pompiore use, because that might have been custom as well, but oh well. Instead, I'm going to assign Grimm's signature clone to the notes smoke, cedar, and fern. Smoke is a pretty obvious choice here since Grim is literally on fire all day, every day, and he loves using his fire magic, which logically also produces smoke. So this scent will be around him regardless most days. Cedar is a nice woody backing to give this combo more of a campfire feel, so that the smoke doesn't become too overwhelming. It's also a tiny bit on the sweet side, I think, but not as sweet as like a maple, and I think that a hint of sugar matches Grimm's cuteness, but it can't be overbearing either. Fern is added in to match the vibe of Ramshackle since the dorm just seems super moldy and mossy since it was abandoned for so long, but mold does not smell great. However, when I think about the dark and damp space, I do sometimes think of ferns, which require shade at the very least, and some varieties like a lot of humidity too. So it seemed like a fitting plant to add into the mix here. Do I know what ferns smell like? Not really. But there was a candle I smelled one time that claimed to be fern scented and it smelled nice, so it'll probably work here too. At least that's my hope anyway. Next up is Riddle, who I feel like doesn't like overly strong scents. Another personal opinion of mine is that a lot of men's fragrances are just very intense, and they always kind of smell the same. So for Riddle and a lot of other folks in this list, I'm stepping out of the conventional notes, I think, and assigning Riddle, at the very least, rose, ivy, and honeysuckle. I feel like rose is pretty self-explanatory, honestly, and this is also a scent that I think Heartstable naturally has, given the sheer amount of rose bushes planted there. So in a way, this note also connects to Riddle and his dorm and the Queen of Hearts. Ivy is here to be quirky, and because when I think of Riddle, I think of smarts, and Ivy League schools are considered to be places where smart people go, and NRC has a very prestigious reputation, so it works from this angle as well. Honeysuckle is here to be a complement to the others while also evoking the visage of gardens and tea parties. Plus, Riddle much prefers honey in his tea, and the nectar of the honeysuckle does in fact taste like honey, so I think this note also connects to him in that way. I think these three combined create a light floral scent with a hint of sweetness, and I think that suits Riddle fairly well. Trey now is a normal guy, so by that logic, he should have a normal clone. But the problem with that is, as previously mentioned, normal clones are very, very intense, and they draw a lot of attention, which is not that normal. So, for Trey, I'm giving him the notes vanilla, honey, and linen to keep him smelling fresh without the scent becoming overbearing. Vanilla is the most vanilla option, so that works extremely well here, but it's also the base flavor for a lot of sweets. Sweets that can be enriched by sugar, sure, but honey is a bit more fun for a scent, no? And linens are fresh and simple, which I also think suits Trey. The biggest benefit I think to this combination is that it's simple enough to be overpowered by the scent of whatever Trey is baking. So practically speaking, Trey would just smell like whatever treats he had in the oven. And if he wasn't baking, he'd at least still smell nice and clean, like his shiny teeth. Now, moving on to Cater, I think he deserves a spicy, energizing scent given how extroverted he is and how he loves his spicy food. Therefore, I'll be giving him the notes of apricot, clove, and ginger here. Apricots were a fruit I forgot existed until researching this video, but the candle of it that I smelled was wonderfully zingy in a way that's subtler than citrus, so I figured it'd be a good fit for Cater, who is extroverted but not overly bubbly like, say, Kalim. Clove is a lovely little spice that often gets used in sweets, which is a little counter to Cater's whole shtick, but it's also rather emblematic of the holidays to me, which are fun and exciting times, and that vibe suits him much better. Ginger in food can be a little bitter, and I think in scent it's a strong and zesty fragrance, which would add a fitting punch to the overall combination. I think the combo of the three would create something energizing that would also be really unique, and it just has this lovely energy to it that I associate with Cater. Deucey Goosey now is a bit more serious and a bit more subdued, and while he's also a sweetheart, I just can't see sweet things working well for him. So instead, Deuce is receiving black currant, cedar, and sage as his scent notes. Black currant is a lovely, deep, herby scent, which one wouldn't expect given that it's a fruit. And I think Deuce is not what you expect either. He's kind and a gentleman, but occasionally his delinquency leaks through for a very unexpected but delightful surprise. Cedar is again one of the sweeter woods, but I do think Deuce has a bit of sweetness to him in his kindness that this can connect to. Plus, it's also just a hint of sweetness that can get overpowered by some of the other elements. The sage is here because it's a very earthy herb that also speaks to Deuce's aspirations to becoming an honors student, as one might become sagely once they attain that title. And while he's currently struggling, there is still hope that one day, he'll reach greatness. Combined, I think these elements have a much more mature vibe that suits Deuce's overall character, especially since out of the brain cell boys, he can sometimes be the most level-headed, even if he is occasionally very dumb. Maybe having the sage will help him with that too. Who knows? Ace, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. This guy is cheery, bubbly, snake oil salesman-y, and for that he needs a scent that is as obnoxious as he is. I will always take an opportunity to cast shade his way. I'm not sorry at all, but his scent isn't going to be shady in the slightest because it's going to be comprised of melon, orange, and cherry, which now that I read them out loud just kind of sounds like I'm describing fruit punch. And honestly, that's perfect for Ace. He loves cherries, so that's why they are here. Also, they majorly favor the color red. Orange is here to balance out the sweeter scents since it's a citrus fruit, but it's also the sweetest of the citrus scents, I think. So it's not balancing things that well. And I think while Ace is socially aware and rather adept at calling folks out, he doesn't always take the most balanced approach. In fact, he rarely ever does. So this is a bit fitting, no? Melon is just a fun scent that I don't think gets used enough, and it's also a bit lighter than the other two, so it can be a nice backing for this particular blend. Overall, this combo is a bit obnoxious, runs the risk of being overbearing, but it is very fun and very youthful, and I think those words best describe Ace. So I think it's a fitting enough combination for him here. Leona is up next, and this guy has got to get an earthy scent. I mean, the dude literally returns things to the earth with his special magic. And while I don't think he's crunchy in any sense of the word, I do think a woody scent would suit him. Like it or not, he does come from a country that is very focused on nature, and he is part of its royal family, so he may not have had much of a choice in picking out his signature fragrance, and honestly at this point I think he'd be too lazy to change it. Therefore, the notes I'm giving him are Palo Santo, Patchouli, and Sandalwood. Now, Palo Santo, I believe, is a very spiritual wood that I've never even had the gall to interact with, given this context, so imagine my surprise when I found a candle of it while I was out and about doing research for this video. And because of this candle, we have another guava situation on our hands, because I can't tell you why, but it was immediately a Leona vibe, so I've included it here. Now, patchouli is a very dividing scent, as I found that folks either love it or hate it, but it's got a lot of depth to it that I think matches Leona's depth of character. Sandalwood is the unifying wood that I swear gets put in everything, and with good reason. It's quite pleasant and not overbearing, so it can add some complexity to this mix. Plus, Leona wears sandals in his school uniform, for what that's worth, so I guess this kinda can connect to him in that way too. Overall, this strong, woody fragrance fits Leona's strength and depth of character, at least in my mind, so that's where I'll leave him. Ruggie, on the other hand, is getting something a bit fresher because I feel like he's not got the time to waste on fancy fragrances, nor does he have the coin to waste on them either. He's a straightforward kind of guy, and he's also a bit of a forager with his dandelions, or so it would seem, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that his notes are dandelion arugula, or rocket, depending on your persuasion, and grapefruit. As mentioned, dandelions are kind of Ruggie's thing, and there's a very light floral scent as well as a delicious tea that I just associate with Ruggie given Rook's described event. Arugula/rocket is my favorite leafy green that's a little bit bitter on the tongue but not so unpleasant, and I can imagine it being in the pile of herbs and things Jade brought to the cafeteria that Ruggie tried to swipe for himself that one time, so it also fits nicely for this too. Grapefruit is a bit bitter, but it's fresh, and I think it'll add a bit of interest to this blend and give it a sunny feel, which I also associate with Ruggie. Despite his struggles, Ruggie seems to stay positive about everything, and that's a very admirable thing. So I hope this blend lives up to that spirit as well. So now for Jack. I struggled a bit because the guy's caring but cold, sweet but prickly, and these dualities were hard for me to capture in scent form. I ultimately went for a somewhat unique blend of spruce, pear, and agave to try to encapsulate the various aspects of Jack's character. Jack is from the Shaftlands, specifically a snowy area, if the tapestry in his room and his heat tolerance are anything to go by, and I associate pines with these kinds of areas. And spruce is a bit more of a refined pine in my mind, which I also think suits Jack's maturity, at least when he's compared to the other freshmen. Pears are one of his favorite foods, as evidenced by Portfest, and I think they're another fruit that's not really all that sweet, but still has a very distinct scent. Agave is here to rep the cactus because, as we all know, Jack, cactus, cactus, Jack, and I think the combination of these three would create something inoffensive that wouldn't really bother Jack all that much. He's got a good sense of smell, so I think anything too strong in any profile would be more of a nuisance to him. But I think these scents being things that he also likes or that he could be familiar with from home wouldn't bug him too much. And I think they go well enough together, so that's that for him. On to Azul we go, and this boy is all about appearances, so whatever cologne he chooses not only has to suit him, but it needs to have purpose. For this reason, I gave him the notes of lavender, chamomile, and suede, because I think the overall scent would be calming, and that's just what he needs you to be when you sign over your soul. Can't have him accused of duress via perfume, right? Lavender is a huge influence in Octavanel's color scheme and is what inspired my thoughts for his candy flavor, so the scent here is also connecting to those influences as well. Chamomile is a mountain herb that Jade probably snuck in here, but it also has similar calming properties that could lull potential victims or clients into a state of ease. Suede, I think, is just a fancy term for a lighter leather scent, but leather always reminds me of briefcases, and those are 100,000% a business staple, so I had to sneak it in here for Azul too. I also think that the suede adds a bit of sophistication to the floral array, complementing Azul's own sophistication in the process. Jade, on the other hand, needs something a bit more herby than florally, because despite spending time curating and collecting all manner of flora, I just don't see him being the flowery type. Therefore, I instead decided to give him bergamot, sea salt, and white tea as notes. Now, sea salt is probably the most obvious note given that Jade is from the sea, and while I think he enjoys his life on land, I don't know that he'd be content to live out the rest of his days on it. He's certainly more enthusiastic about the possibility, I think, than Floyd, but regardless, I feel like I needed to connect him to the sea somehow, and sea salt was an easy way to do so, since it fits in well with the other elements I wanted to give him. Both of the remaining notes come from my and his obsession with tea, as bergamot oil is used to give Earl Grey its unique flavor and scent, and it's also just really lovely. White tea is a very light but also captivating scent that I think creates the perfect base for the combination with the sea salt and the bergamot. With all three combined, Jade will smell like a sophisticated tea house by the sea, and I think that vibe suits his carefully crafted persona well. Floyd, however, is not that sophisticated. In fact, Floyd is very much a loose cannon, and I can imagine him going wild with fragrances when they first got on land because I'm not really sure how such things would work under the sea, given all the water. Ultimately, though, I think he would have settled on, or at least currently is indulging, a combination of mango, seagrass, and lemon. I don't really know why, but I think mango-scented things are very lively and vibrant, and I get that vibe from Floyd. Couple this with the lemon and you're starting to get a nice tropical smoothie going on, which also suits him. Then in comes the wild ingredient of seagrass, harkening back to his roots in the sea while also providing a nice counterbalance to the sweeter elements of the scent. I don't really know how these three would combine or what quantities of each would make the most sense, but they just feel right for Floyd. They have the right energy, and I think that's very important for this fickle eel. Next up is Kalim, who is getting a scent that's likely one of the more self-explanatory ones, with his fragrance being comprised of coconut, jasmine, and lotus. Kalim loves coconuts, end of story. He's also based off the Sultan, whose daughter is Jasmine, and Jasmine is also a very lovely flower with a very lovely scent. And Jasmine was quite heroic in Aladdin, and Kalim is quite heroic at NRC, at least via comparison. Lotus enters the door because it's another lovely floral that I think would complement the other two notes fairly well, and lotuses are by and large water flowers, and you know whose special magic is water-based? So that's the extent of the connections here. Together, I think these notes would create a refreshing scent that matches Kalim's cheery personality without being overly sugary or sweet, which may seem a bit odd given my rationale for Ace, but I do think this refinement is fitting of someone of Kalim's stature, and I'm sure Jamil or other folks would have ensured that the heir to such a prestigious family was not going out there smelling like fruit punch. And if it took coconuts to do that, then so be it. Conversely, I think Jamil would have a stronger woody scent with notes of saffron, mahogany, and cinnamon. Despite blending into the background, I can't imagine Jamil having a fragrance that's similar to Trey's, and I think Jamil's intellect, schemery, and overall attentiveness deserve something a bit more sophisticated. Saffron is a very expensive spice that adds a floral depth to a dish while also giving it a slight hint of bitterness, and Jamil does have this same sort of zing in his personality too. Plus, if my sources are correct, this spice is often used in or associated with Mediterranean and Middle Eastern food, so it's likely an ingredient that Jamil has experience with given his culinary talents. Cinnamon, I think, can be a nice complementary spice that'll give this scent even more depth, and the final addition of mahogany gives the whole combo a wooding backing to balance it out. I don't know why this specific combo also seems to have the same color palette as Jamil, as these elements also feel very crimson in my mind. Not entirely sure why, but I'll take it as another connection to Jamil, making this fragrance even more fitting. Next up is Vil, who absolutely smells like old money. There is no way this guy doesn't just ooze sophistication, and given his likeness to the beautiful queen, I can't help but keep his notes on the floral side. Herbs might be a bit better from the poison aspect, but those earthy tones don't really suit the vibe of luxury to me. So instead, Vil is receiving magnolia, peony, and cashmere as his notes. The combination of magnolia and peony is such a vibe. It feels very Hollywood, very glamorous, very rich, and yet it's just two flowers put together. I really don't know how these two florals exude such extravagance, but they do, and it's fantastic. Cashmere is also something I see listed in a lot of scents that I couldn't describe for y'all if I tried. I don't think I've ever picked up on it before in anything, but it is a blend of softwoods, musk, and vanilla. So I guess by this consideration standard, it's kind of cheating, but Vil deserves the extra notes because he's quite extra himself, no? And I think this scent combination is truly befitting a queen, so that's what Vil's getting here. Now, what could befit a huntsman like Rook? Well, it's got to be earthy and herby because Rook's quite literally in the trees and crawling through the mud to witness beauty. So the real question becomes what herbs and what wood notes would best describe him. Perhaps the special blend that suits him is made up of thyme, maple, and oak. Thyme is a very subtle herb that in my experience is mainly used for meat dishes, which suits the general targets of the hunt. A pheasant, chicken, or deer, or what have you, seasoned with some thyme and a couple other herbs is a great meal. This herb is also used on potatoes quite frequently too, and I associate potatoes with hearty stews, which also reminds me of Rook, given that the meat chunks could have been hunted, maybe, perhaps. Oaks, though, are very common trees here on the East Coast, at least in the northern parts of the US, and I think they're often regarded as the classic quintessential tree, or perhaps I'm just biased. But I think in fragrance, it's still a fun wood note that's a bit more unique than the more common cedar or sandalwood, and Rook deserves that uniqueness. I also gave him maple because it's a bit sweeter, and we all know how Rook loves his honeyed words and fantastical compliments, so he deserves a bit of sweetness that could work well with the other elements. And thus, this combination was born. Epel now, of course, is going to smell like apples, but the type of apple I'm going to leave up to you. However, I also think that he's got a bit of lilac and rose to accompany it. Lilacs are a very lovely purple flower that I think about anytime I see Epel's hair, given its color, and they have a very light floral scent that I think could work with the apple. Epel is also rather spunky and rambunctious, and rather than have him smell like an apple pie, I gave him a rose instead as the final note to invoke the thorns of the plant. Sure, you're not smelling the thorns in the fragrance, but every rose has to have them, right? And so too does Epel. Now, in universe, I'm sure this combination was made by Vil, and I'm sure that Epel hates it, because strong guys don't smell like flowers, right? But I think over time he's come to appreciate the curated hints to his personality and the strength that even flowers can have, so this is what he's getting here. Not gonna lie, I had no idea what to give Idia. I really struggled with him, and I'm not confident that what I decided on would make a good fragrance. But I'm giving him starfruit, pomegranate, and you anyways. Truthfully, I have no idea what starfruit smells like, but this guy likes Star Rogue, right? So maybe he'd like this smell. I don't know, I just couldn't stop thinking about this godforsaken bullet hell. And speaking of hell, pomegranates are rather popular in the underworld, right? So why not add that into the mix? These fruits often smell a little sour too, which I think works better for Idia than the sweeter scents of other fruits, and maybe it could balance the starfruit. Maybe. Yew is here to add a woody note to give this fragrance some depth, and was also exclusively picked because yew trees often represent death, so there's that. But I also don't know what they smell like, so Idia's fragrance is more mystery than anything else, but maybe, hopefully, it suits him. Ortho was a bit easier for me since he's extroverted and adorable, so I went with some fresh and youthful notes to complement these aspects of him. The combo I'm giving him is lemon, tuberose, and hyacinth, another fresh floral arrangement. To be fair, I think almost any scent could work for Ortho, and I think Ortho could likely produce any scent he wanted to, given his special robot powers. But I think this specific blend speaks to that youthful spring that Ortho is now experiencing since he has become sentient. Lemon is zingy, springy, and fun, which also describes Ortho. Hyacinths are my favorite flower, bloom in the spring, and have a super strong scent that I think would complement the citrus well. Tuberose is more subtle, so I think it would act as a nice blender for the other two strong scents. And since Ortho is in the spring season of his sentience, I can think of no better blend than this one for him. Malleus is also, I suppose, technically in his spring season, being a youngster and all that. But he's a bit more reserved, a bit more introverted, and a quiet majesty surrounds him. Therefore, I think it would be best if he had a fragrance that was blended from rain, cypress, and frankincense instead. Rain is a fresh scent blended from some other bits, but since Malleus doesn't mind the rain and rain is necessary to see his gargoyles in action, this scent is something I naturally associate with him. Cypress trees hold a variety of different meanings, but one is long life and prosperity, things that I think Malleus will have and bring to his people. Plus, this wood note gives a nice backing to the rain and to the frankincense. The frankincense comes from the fact that this is one of the main ingredients used by Catholic churches for their incense, and whenever I think of a Catholic church, I usually think of a Gothic cathedral, which are great examples of Gothic architecture, which is Malleus's bread and butter. So, blending these three notes together creates a fragrant aesthetic portrait of Malleus, and it is why I am giving them to him here. Lilia now has so much going on. He was a soldier, is a father, is a student, is young, is old, is everything and nothing, all at once. So how do I give him a fragrance? Despite Lilia's chaotic nature, I do still feel like he is a source of calm and understanding, someone who wouldn't judge you, at least not outright, and who would be able to give you great advice for whatever it was that troubled you. Because of this, I settled on the notes of bamboo, eucalyptus, and yuzu. The combination of these elements is rather uplifting, with the subtleness of the bamboo blending well with the energy of the eucalyptus and the brightness of the yuzu, crafting something suitable for Lilia. I also think these scents can be calming together, even though they still have that energy to them, and that suits the vibe of this Bat Dad for me. There's not really a deeper meaning to these picks, they're mainly just vibes, but I do think they work, and the freshness also kind of complements Lilia's open mind as well. Silver now is a softie, and for that I think he needs a soft scent. However, he's also a great fighter and can be serious and deadly under the right circumstances, so his scent can't be too soft. With this in mind, I gave him the notes of oat milk, cardamom, and peppercorn. Oat milk combines the bland scent of milk with the scent of oats, and since horses like oats, and Silver is in the equestrian club, this specific variation of scent I think works well for him. Cardamom is a warm, sweet spice that invokes the warmth and gentleness that define Silver's character. Together, these two elements make up his softness, his kindness, and his peace-seeking nature. They are given a spicier edge with the inclusion of peppercorn, which is here to represent Silver's battle-ready side. I wanted to ensure that this note had a bit more kick to it, and it stayed away from those baking spices of like cinnamon and ginger, because that could have made him end up smelling like a cookie, and that would just only further the softness. So I had to go with something that gave a bit more edge. I don't think peppercorn is obnoxious, but it does stand out, and I think it's the perfect hidden surprise for this kiddo's fragrance. Last but not least is Sebek, who is a rather intense fellow, so I tried not to make his fragrance too intense lest he become completely overwhelming. Therefore, I've assigned him lime, parsley, and rosemary as his notes, because I think this earthy combo would likely remind Sebek of the Briar Valley, while also having a bit of personality with the inclusion of the lime. Parsley and rosemary are two of the herbs cited in some rhyme schemes of Scarborough Fair, a ballad about the impossible tasks given to a former lover for their hand in marriage. This ballad takes inspiration from another ballad, The Elfin King, where the one giving the impossible tasks is an elf trying to force a young woman to be his wife by giving her said impossible task. She then responds with her own impossible task for him to do before she becomes his, and then is thusly allowed to return home when he cannot complete it. Sebek would never force someone in this way, however, because the ballads are connected to the Fae, and Sebek is very proud of his Fae heritage, these herbs just stood out to me as ones that could match him. Parsley is a bit sweet, and rosemary has a very lovely depth, so I think together with the lime, these two would create a nice herby zest that isn't tied to the kitchen and can stand on its own 2 feet. And I think this kind of earthy fragrance with a twist just suits Sebek's overall personality without being overbearing. leaving his booming voice to claim that credit. And that's that for this consideration. Do you think these personalized concoctions fit the Twist Boys, or do you have some other ideas as to what fragrances might suit them? I feel like a lot of these combos are a little out of the box, so let me know your thoughts down below. And while you're there, let me know if you like this content and want more like it. You should also like and subscribe to show your support. And before you go, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing, and I hope you have a wonderful day.